All right. Well, Jared, it's been a long time. I think it's been a few years since you and I met, and I invited you on into this conversation today mainly because I'm really obsessed these days about helping make work better for business owners and business leaders. I've got a book coming out on September 25th. It's coming out in all formats. It's actually out in paperback right now. But when I saw a post that you had put up on LinkedIn literally just a few days ago about something you were starting, I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to have a conversation with this guy because it sounds like what you're doing is not only going to help make work better, but I actually have a chapter in my book that's about the subject that your company sort of provides a service around. So, quick backstory though. I don't know if you remember how it was we met, but it was several years ago. I was leading a totally different company, and I was officing out of a co-working space in a relatively small town, a town that you were not from, and we just happened to meet there. And what was really shocking for me is that you handed me a book, and the book had your name on it as the author. It was like a real published book. I believe it was 3 billion under 30, and if it wasn't that one, it was 2 billion under 20. And I think I looked you up later. Maybe we connected on Facebook or LinkedIn or something. And I was like, yeah, I met a guy, in a co-working space, gives me this wonderful, thick, like hardcover like book, and he's only 21 years old. And the book you handed me was not your first, but your second book. So tell me kind of just a little bit about like how all that came. Like, how did you become a published author at such a young age?
Yeah, well, great to reconnect. Thanks for having me on. Uh, I've been an entrepreneur since 15. What I did at 15 doesn't matter because it was more of a project, not a company. 16, I got to work at a VC-backed startup called 15Five, which led to Offsite today, sort of a pioneering remote first company, and also one that today is one of the leading employee engagement and performance management software providers out there. And while I was at 15Five, I came across the Teal Foundation, or what used to be called like the 20 under 20 program. And so basically like Peter Thiel, PayPal co-founder, first investor in Facebook, like big name in Silicon Valley, has this program he's been running for a decade now, um, where he's basically like giving kids $100,000 grants to drop out of college or not to go to college or delay college. Um, I never got one of those grants, unfortunately, but they had a little bit of a media campaign when they were first starting, and they also grew a community of young entrepreneurs. Uh, and I was fortunate to find out about the existence of this program, get invited to one of their conferences after failing to be accepted. I applied,
Mm.
got rejected, but they invited me to this conference. And I went to this conference when I was 17. It was the first time in my life I was around like-minded young entrepreneurs and scientists, and really was just like blown away. And so uh, decided to write a book. I don't know why I decided a book versus a
Mm.
podcast versus a newsletter, but wrote a book profiling some of these top performing millennials. And I really started with that niche community. But as the project grew, decided we wanted to cover young scientists and nonprofit founders and Olympians and just anyone young doing crazy, wacky stuff with their lives. And so that became the basis for my first book, 2 Billion Under 20. I worked with a talented young entrepreneur, Stacey Ferreira, on that book, who we're still dear friends to this day. And she ended up being a Teal Fellow at some point.
Mm.
Forbes 30 under 30. She's started and sold two companies already. But yeah, we went through the whole process of creating the book, and then after the book was done, we were pitching it to traditional publishing houses. Ended up getting an agent, then a publisher, and so the first book was traditionally published. I think it came out when I was 17 or 18 or something that is very young and kind of crazy. So I might be like the youngest published business author in Macmillan's 175-year history, like give or take. I don't know. I'm sure someone's beat me there. but I'm one of the younger published authors there. And then that whole process was illuminating. There's a lot of positives of it. Got some good press out of the book launch. Certainly not having to create physical hardcovers is great and not have to worry about logistics. But there were a lot of elements of the traditional publishing process I didn't like. And so I wanted to work on another book, did 3 Billion Under 30, which is sort of the sequel, profiling other talented millennials, but this time from a slightly older demographic. The 2 billion under 20 was the idea was there was 2 billion people in the world at or under 20 years old. We were profiling a select few of them that could hopefully inspire the rest of the generation. 3 billion under 30, same thing, like 3 billion people at or under 30 years old, give or take a few 100,000, or a few 100 million probably. And then, with 3 billion under 30, ended up profiling people like Jake Paul, people like Matt Mullenweg, who's the founder of WordPress, the co-founder of Duolingo. So much more prominent names in 3 billion under 30 than the first book. But I decided to self-publish that one. And so that's where I printed 10,000 hardcover books and hired designers and basically replicated the traditional publishing model to an extent. And just sold those books on my website and when I was speaking. But yeah, writing books is awful. I've done it one more time. I have a book called Networking that I published last year, but I've been so busy with other projects, namely Offsite, that I just haven't really promoted networking too much. But I don't know, writing books is terrible, as you know now, but also it's amazing at the same time. You can really sort of synthesize ideas and get it out to the world, hopefully provide some value. And there's this lasting element of a book, especially if you write a good book, versus any sort of interview or newsletter post or podcast. So yeah, there might be some more books in me in the future, but I got started at a young age, and so already got 3 under my belt. 27 now as we record this. So I can wait for a decade and still have more books under my belt than a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I've been in the book or printed matter publishing industry for maybe 15, 16, 17 years now. And even as an industry insider, I can tell you that when you actually go about writing, and especially the self-publishing part of a book, it is a commitment of real sacrifice. It takes all of your being. You can't put half of your focus on it. It just takes a big chunk. It takes a pound of flesh, to be sure. And I've certainly experienced that here recently. One of the other things, in addition to which I'll get back to, another interesting part about that I think is profound about the fact that you had a book at that age to give to people, and what that probably did from just a networking and prospecting standpoint. But in addition to, again, by the age of 21, you have 2 published books. You're also, by that point, you already have a TED Talk, and USA Today has already given you the moniker of the world's most connected millennial. And obviously that probably has a lot to do with the books that came out with. But tell me a little bit more about the TED Talk, and what was the subject matter the same as the book, or what was that about?
Yeah, the talk was why young people hold more power than ever before. It got a lot of these catchy titles. And it was right between the 2 books, so really profiled some of the lessons learned across studying hundreds of top performing millennials, with the idea of helping anyone accomplish more in a shorter amount of time. Was sort of how we started steering the takeaways. But that also came about just as a result of networking, to your point. And that was the biggest thing I got from the book series. Certainly learned a lot about writing and editing and traditional publishing, self-publishing, thought leadership, media. But by far the biggest takeaway I got from writing these books was I just built an amazing network for myself, and I'm still in touch with many of the book contributors. Matt Mullenweg with WordPress. His company is called Automatic, which owns WordPress and Tumblr and a bunch of other like WordPress related companies. They actually became corporate investors in Offsite. So all these years after I wrote this book, I didn't know that I was going to start this company, but these relationships just form and evolve over time. And that's how the TED Talk came about. One of the folks I think in 3 billion under 30 who worked at IBM at the time, she was sort of the top intrapreneur at the company, or sort of getting a lot of press for being very bold and creative with her initiatives in the company. TED was working with IBM on a co-branded TED event, and she invited me to apply to speak. I did, and I got in. So I just hopped up on stage and spoke. I think a lot of great opportunities in life happen as a result of random encounters like we had, or really dedicated and intentional relationship building and community building. So yeah, just got to get out there, got to get on interviews, got to just talk to people. Good things might happen.
Well, what's interesting about the random encounter that we had, because I mean, I've met a lot of people in the last 6 years. I think it was about 6 years ago that you and I met, and I also met a lot of new people at that space that I was at for 2 years, where you and I met. And what stuck out to me was, because I think again we connected or something on LinkedIn. I've seen your post, but what I always think of when I'm scrolling through and I see Jared Kleinert's name there, I think, hey, that's the guy that had the book. And he gave me a copy of it. In fact, I think he gave me a copy of both of your books, like while you were there. So yeah, so that's always stood out. The other thing I've noticed is that generally speaking, if you're trying to build a reputation, a book helps. And for whatever reason, having a book and speaking go hand in hand. It's almost like when you write a book, you better write a keynote address, a slide deck that goes along with that book, or that helps you, or sort of a supplement to the information that you're sharing in there, because people are going to ask you to speak, because there's that instant gratification there, and speaking obviously can be very lucrative as well. What's interesting is I referenced earlier, I started following you on LinkedIn after connecting with you and see your post, and I saw you got into some really cool things right afterwards. But the thing that stuck out the most was it looked like you, and I saw this as it was sort of forming from the ground floor, but you were developing an offsite company. And the reason this really resonates with me is that in my book, Make Work Better, I really build the case that for workplaces, companies to be better, to do better, to be more productive, they have to have healthy teams, healthy cultures, just a healthy organization overall. So the first probably 3/4 of my book is dedicated to showing what a healthy company, what a healthy team looks like, especially as it revolves around recruiting, staffing, hiring, all about like the roles that people are playing at work. Are the right people doing the right kinds of work? Is the work someone's being asked to do, does it really align with their gifts and passions, or is it drudgery? And so I really kind of unpack that. But then toward the later chapters of the book, I really get into showing how healthy companies, profitable teams, productive teams, how they operate. And I do touch on the importance of what I'd call sort of the operational rhythms. And I do mention the importance of a quarterly offsite in the book. Now, I'm I and there are companies that do all kinds. They do quarterlies, they do annual retreats. There are different rhythms for which a company would need an offsite. So, but I touch on it in the book. I kind of say what a quarterly offsite should be, what it shouldn't be, but I don't go into a lot of detail as far as location. And it sounds like that's where your company comes in. But in addition to like picking out locations, like you also help with like are there with templates for agendas or ideas on what to do for team building, just kind of unpack like what the company has been doing. And then we'll talk in a little bit about some of the success that companies have seen that have used your service.
Yeah. As I may have alluded to, I run a company called Offsite, offsite.com, started it during the pandemic. And the reason I started it was because over 10 years ago, I was working at 15.5, kind of got to see the future in terms of how remote and hybrid teams were going to have a cadence of offsites or rhythm of offsites, to your point. in order to recruit talented team members by giving the perk of like, hey, you're going to go on company sponsored vacations essentially. So that's a great recruiting tool, is your offsites, but also to keep team members engaged, aligned, and retain them. Offsites are really critical. And so I got to attend offsites when I was an employee, over a decade ago. And then in my 7-year speaker, author, consultant turn of my career, I ended up speaking at corporate offsites, essentially facilitating executive team retreats, specifically for Fortune 1000 global marketing teams that wanted to market to millennials, and kind of read the book and want to learn more about that. And then had a mastermind business right before the pandemic where I was running summits for entrepreneurs, and that was called Meeting in the Minds, and did that quarterly, and they were 3-day summits. So did like 14 Meeting in the Minds experiences before the pandemic. But pandemic hit. I'm sitting there. I'm looking at the macro trend of companies that went remote or hybrid. Back when I was at 15.5, maybe it was a single digit percentage of companies, like 5%, 9% of companies were remote or hybrid. Before the pandemic, it was probably 20% of teams or more, give or take. But I was betting that like every company was going to go remote or hybrid. And then as a direct result, like they were going to have to plan offsites to get everyone back together in person. Those offsites would become even more important than they would be if you were running an office first culture. Because it's the only time people are going to get together in person. It's going to be the pillars to building great culture. And no one knows how to run great offsites. They are talked about in books like Scaling Up or the EOS system. There's quite a few sort of rhythm of business books, or like how to run your business type books that talk about doing offsites, and some of them do start getting into agendas on how to run some of those sessions. But to your point, like just the logistics of planning an offsite could be a pain in the ass if you are not experienced. And so we built a company to solve a lot of those problems, helping you find your location, helping you with travel, all the logistics on the ground, communicating with your team, et cetera, so that we can then get to the higher level conversations of how do you actually facilitate meaningful connections while everyone's together. How do you structure an agenda that's going to yield the highest ROI for your objectives, whether it's a strategic planning offsite for a leadership team, or it's a sales kickoff meeting at the beginning of the year, or it's a president's club and you're trying to celebrate everyone, or it's a training session. There's probably 20 different offsites or types of offsites we've seen since we started the company. And yeah, it's now sort of an exploding space. The corporate travel market's going to be over a $500 billion market by 2030. And then offsites as a part of that is probably going to be a $50-60 billion niche in that market, and it's just exploding. And so if you believe that remote or hybrid work is here to stay versus office first work, then there's going to be lots of offsites. We're trying to build sort of the end-to-end planning platform for that. Yeah, it's been an amazing ride. Like we've planned about 150 offsites all over the world in the last 3 years. Primarily, it's been a service company with some tech enablement, but ultimately we are building software products and trying to become a scalable tech company. So we have raised some money. We do have some engineers. We're building and shipping some products. And yeah, it's just been an exciting ride. We're working with really cool companies, all of whom are either leveraging offsites already to recruit, engage, retain top talent, or see that they must do that now that they're remote or hybrid, and are trying to figure out the best ways to do it. And we're coming in and helping them with that.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend to every business owner, business leader, anyone that's responsible for, again, those rhythms, those offsite rhythms, to check out your website, offsite.com. When you go there, there is a case studies page on the site, and it's like real stories from people that have actually that have used the service, that have had an offsite that you've helped to facilitate at least the logistics of. And what's interesting is, as you would expect, I mean, there are going to be some companies that have used your service that do have an office where the majority of people come the majority of the work day. However, to your point, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of businesses where even if before 2020, they were just like, oh, we don't believe in, like there's literally a client that I worked with for a couple of years that I heard say, yeah, we do not believe or endorse virtual teams of any kind. Like everybody has to be in the same physical space or else we don't consider the work to be done. And I can tell you that that company is now a distributed team that has people in various states. And then there's another company I've worked with that has two, on-site office locations in two different states actually, and they have anywhere between like 10 people to maybe 20 to 30 people at the other location. However, the majority of their workforce is distributed, and so it's true whenever they have a meeting, they usually try to get together at one of those offices, but they're having a big event next week, and it's not it's a conference that they're putting on for their various clients and customers. And what you know, it's going to kind of serve as somewhat of an offsite meeting just for the people that work. Because again, people that work together are doing it all through Zoom. It's all virtual, and that's a good example of a company that needs offsites just for getting the majority of their workforce together in one place. And on your website within your case studies page, you mentioned and there again, there's a team that's a little bit more traditional. Maybe it's sort of a mixed bag, but then you've got a company there that's a completely distributed company. So when we think about it, like the offsites are the only times that their employees, that their whole team get to come together face to face at all. And so tell me about like what's your favorite amongst those case studies, just from the standpoint of whether the company was just a really interesting company to work with, or what your offsite planning did for that team. Just share with me your favorite.
Yeah, I mean, we primarily work with remote and hybrid teams, and I think there would be another 5 to 10% of companies that were fully distributed if they could get out of their leases for offices. So there'll be more in the next, few years as leases expire and companies don't renew. But yeah, I think we try and focus on like money and time saved, because that's the easiest way to sell a new client. Is like, hey, without us, you're going to spend 100 hours planning this offsite. With us, you'll spend 10 hours and just be decision making, sort of adding your high level vision of how this should work. We're going to do all the hard work. And then we also have a marketplace of hotels and relationships with other vendors where we're getting 20% or more in terms of discounts on room blocks, on meeting space, on food and beverage. And so we're basically paying for ourselves just on the savings that we're getting with hotels and other offsite venues. Plus we're saving you all that time, et cetera. So that's like the clearest way I can sell offsite's value. What I'm most passionate about is the increased trust and intimacy. It's the ability to take teams that are cross department and have them brainstorm solutions to pressing problems at those companies. It's being able to have people join a company and within their first few months, they're having this experience of meeting everyone else, really tapping into the culture, and then they become much more engaged with the mission of the company. And so those are all the things that I care most about. Is probably stuff that you would talk about in your book in terms of basically how to lead a company effectively. And so like at minimum, we're taking care of the logistics so that you can read your book and then go lead your company at the offsite more effectively. But ideally, like we're empowering companies to think about how they want to do strategic planning better, how they want to build trust and intimacy, how they want to brainstorm new ideas, how they want to solve problems. We have done some customer facing events, and so we can help them like generate more revenue through those kind of offsites. We've done CEO peer groups like YPO chapter meetings, and so that can help you sort of level up as a leader. If you're going to a better produced, better facilitated YPO or EO meeting, that offsite is helping to power. So I think it's the ripple effect of what our team is helping our clients do that gives me the most joy and impact. Um, it's hard to quantify though, and so we really just focus on like time and money saved, and like you know on that front we've probably saved a million, maybe up to $1.5 million for clients on their offsites, thousands of hours of planning. And these are primarily for startups where like they're everyone at those companies are already doing 2 or 3 jobs, and they're doing really important things. Like we worked with AI companies, we've worked with hospitals, we've worked with various nonprofits, we've also worked with hedge funds and like other cool like fintech startups. So a lot of mission driven companies, and we're able to sort of help them do their job better as a result of better offsites.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you're really doing the hard work. See, these companies are not in the business of doing offsites, right? Somebody's got to take time out of their regular work and like, oh, I know I've got to go plan this. I got to look up prices. I got to book this, worry about that. And you're literally taking all of it. So to me, just the savings and hassle and what it does to the productivity of the whole company, because it allows them to keep focusing on what they're doing. There's a chapter in my book where I talk about, I think I share a little bit of a personal experience, which is there was at one point, I think it was 2014, like wrote down that my ideal situation was to not work in any type of office or with anybody. Like I just want to work from home in the corner of my, home office, not be bothered. I'll be so much more productive. And I got my way a couple years later, and I was absolutely miserable, not having any. And what's funny is, you can be on Zoom with people, 7 hours a day, but you can't hug people over Zoom, right? Like when I actually see the teams that I work with, and we get in person, it's like the hug is like the first. You can't do that over Zoom, right? And so sometimes offsites are necessary just to be able to get people in the right kind of proximity. One of the things that there's a headline in my book where again I'm talking about there's an interesting trend that started in 2020 and 2021. This is when more companies went remote and virtual. That is the employee satisfaction, the employee engagement levels actually went down once most companies started going virtual. You would think, oh, well, now everybody can work from home. They can do what they want to do. And that's actually not true. More people got to be more miserable. And so the headline that I put in my book was how trading the constraints of location mandated work for the freedom and flexibility of work from home was a Trojan horse of isolation for many. So yeah, it sounds great to have a lot of flexibility, and it seems like there's a lot of freedom and completely virtual teams. But the problem is isolation does creep in so much more easily when that happens, which is why I think just from the standpoint of making teams healthier, companies more productive, I think that what you're doing with offsite is absolutely essential. Now you've got something big that's launching August 15th. So by the time most people are able to see this, this will have launched. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Oh, kind of to wrap up what you just said, our mission is to make the world a more connected place. And so precisely to your point, like we were in a loneliness pandemic or loneliness epidemic before the pandemic. Like even the Surgeon General like came out and said like this is a really big issue. We got to fix it. And the pandemic made it worse. And so I think we are playing a very small role to help companies, come back together in person, allow people to make friends at work, and be able to, have their colleagues to look to when they're having a bad day at home, or it's like if you do a quarterly cadence of offsites, like in the middle, like day 45 between your offsites, you're like like I want to quit my job, or life sucks. You now have friends you could sort of message on Slack and get on a call with or on Zoom with, and there's just a deeper bond with those colleagues and to the company and the mission of the company you're working for. So we're here to make the world a more connected place. To do that, we need to help more companies plan offsites. I think we've done a lot, like 150 offsites or so in about 2 years. Is a lot of work. But we see a world where we can build software that can help thousands of companies plan offsites and help tens of thousands or millions of knowledge workers. And so the first software product that we launched, which is out on Product Hunt today on August 15th, is basically Airbnb for offsite venues. And so you can go to offsite.com, You can make an account. There's no cost to sign up. There's no credit card required. And you can start searching the few hundred hotels that we've built relationships with all around the world. And it works just like Airbnb. You can sort of filter in a few different ways by sort of vibe. If you want like a more remote location or a waterfront location, you could search by price. You could search by capacity, make sure that the place has enough room for your team, but also reduce the capacity to maybe get a full buyout of a place if you really want that kind of intimate environment. Search by location, and then you get a bunch of results. You check out all the pretty pictures on the profiles and all the important information like number of meeting spaces, capacity of those meeting spaces, distance from airport, anything you would need to sort of make a decision about what venue would be good for your offsite. And then you can put a request in to book with a hotel. We send that to the hotel. We come back with proposals as soon as they're ready. And typically we're saving clients again, like 20% or more on their room blocks, their meeting space, food and beverage, et cetera. So, what for me with Meeting of the Minds took like a month of work to look at various hotels and in places that I don't normally travel, to then get in touch with the right person. You'd be shocked at how little hotels like want to make money. Like they make it so hard to get in touch with any salesperson or any events person, and then they treat you like you're running a wedding or you're running a conference when like you're running an offsite, and an offsite is a very particular thing, and it's mission critical to your company's culture, as we've talked about. So we just built a marketplace around that, and made sure that all the venues are vetted for offsites. You're going to have a great experience there. And so, we're on Product Hunt if you're listening to this August 15th. So definitely go to producthunt.com and upvote us and share the campaign. That would definitely help us out a lot. Otherwise, whenever you're listening to this, you can go to offsite.com, make an account, and find your offsite venue. And then, into next year, we'll be building out more software. So sort of a offsite planning platform. Think an agenda builder feature, a budget builder feature, maybe an app one day you can use while you're at your offsite to collect notes from the team or send out updates to the agenda as you're sort of doing things on the fly. There's a whole ecosystem of software that could sort of 10x the experience of planning this on a spreadsheet, or trying to wrangle flights in all different places, or keep tabs of what you're spending. Even just simple things like getting dietary preferences from attendees. Like there should be an attendee profile where your team could just say like, I'm a vegan and my t-shirt size is large, and like you don't have to keep asking them these questions like every time you invite them to your quarterly offsite or all hands meeting. The information's already there, and so then you can go from there. Like there's so much that can be built from a software standpoint, but Airbnb for offsite venues is sort of our first product. Offsite.com, check it out.
Yeah, I'm going to check it out on August 15th. I'm telling you, this is going to save people a lot of time, because right now, whoever on these teams and these companies is going to do an offsite, they kind of have to start from scratch and go one by one and go to different websites, different vendors. And I know with my frustrations whenever I plan things like this, it's because you talked about pricing and saving money on cost. It's you have to double check, like, oh, look, it's only X amount a night. And you're like, oh, no, there's the fine print. It's actually 3 times that much per night. There's things like that that just drive people crazy and make them want to give up. But something like this, I think, is going to be absolutely huge, because, again, the reason that, as soon as I saw your post, and again, I've been following what you've been doing with Offsite for a couple of years now, is I'm looking at, again, how do we improve company culture? How do we make work better just across the board? Offsites are an increasingly integral part, because of the fact that it's more needed now than it was prior to 2020, when virtual teams were just kind of emerging. And now I think virtual teams are definitely the norm. Because again, even with companies that are locked into those leases that have office space, may even have multiple offices, they still have a good percentage, if not a majority, of their workforce virtual. And a lot of them won't, have not taken the time to really do getting people the hard work of getting people together in person, on either a regular basis, or just like hey, we haven't gotten together in 3 years. We should do that. Like, even if it's not something that's part of their regular meeting rhythm, if it's something that's like, hey, this it's high time we do this, having something like this is going to be huge to help them do that. So thank you for that. And at some point, as after my book's released, I'm going to have a website that's going to have recommended resources and partners that are helping to do and facilitate and provide services for the things I mentioned in my book. So you guys can check that out there as well. But right now, producthunt.com is what you're saying, as well as it's going to be on offsite.com as well, this new service.
Yeah, for August 15th in particular,
Yep.
we're on Product Hunt, which is, if you don't know what that is, it's sort of one of the top websites in the tech industry to launch and discover new products. So we decided that we're just going to make a bunch of noise there on August 15th. If you're listening to this on August 15th and I've done my job, we should be in the top like 10. So if you just go to producthunt.com, you'll see us, and then, give us an upvote and a share and comment if you want. I'll be active on the platform throughout the whole day. And then any other time or on August 15th, you can just go to offsite.com and hopefully discover everything else from there.
Sounds good. Hey, thanks so much for just kind of educating me on all of this, because again, it's one thing to know that offsite should happen, but there's a lot of work that goes into for those that have done it, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And so what you're doing is, again, saving people a lot of time and money. It's helping make work better. So thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for the platform, and thanks for your time.